She didn't marry for love. Not at first. When Emily walked down that aisle in diamonds and a designer dress, she told herself it was strategy, not romance. He was older, quiet, a billionaire who barely smiled. But 3 years later, standing in the echo of his mansion, staring at the will that left her nothing, Emily realized something terrifying. He had planned everything. Before we dive deeper, if you believe in karma, in truth rising, and in the power of redemption, subscribe to Tracelight Stories. We uncover the unexpected in the lives we think we know. Now back to Emily's story. She met Charles Huxley at a fundraiser. She was 27, bartending on the side, trying to keep up appearances in a world where everyone wore designer shoes and fake smiles. He was 61, reserved and had eyes like glass. Rumors swirled about him. Old money, eccentric, and loved his privacy. He barely spoke to anyone. But when Emily spilled a drink on a donor's Prada purse and nearly got fired, Charles stepped in. He paid for the bag, left a $10,000 tip, then walked away. 2 weeks later, a handwritten note arrived at Emily's apartment. Note reads, "I admire courage under pressure. How about dinner with me later tonight?" It was typed. No phone number. At exactly 6:45 p.m., a black SUV car arrived to pick her for dinner. She said yes, but still had her reservations of him. Their relationship was odd. No social media, no public appearances, no long walks on the beach like lovers do. But every week, he'd shower her with new gifts, fancy jewelry, expensive vacation trips. He made investments in her name, asked her about her dreams, her fears, her childhood, but never about love. When he finally proposed her, it was in a letter slipped under her door. No kneeling, no ring, just a contract, a prenup, and a question. If you choose this, understand that appearances may deceive you. With a smile on her face, she signed the dotted lines, fully aware of her strategies of how she's about to become a billionaire's wife. At first, she played the part. She hosted parties, took pictures, told friends she was settling into a lifestyle. They all envied her, but Charles remained distant. He slept in a separate room because he wasn't sexually attracted to her. He'd spend hours in his locked study, always calm and never raised his voice, never demanded attention. But he always watched her closely, and she finally asked the million-dollar question, if he loved her. His response, "Love is measured in time, not words." Then, 3 years in, he died. Quietly. No warning. He had a heart attack in his sleep, and everything unraveled. He had a will, and it was short. To Emily, I leave nothing material. But something of far greater value awaits if she dares to look. No mansion, no bank accounts, no stock options, just a key, and a map of the house marked with an X behind a false wall in the attic. That night, alone in silk pajamas, she climbed to the attic. It was dusty, cold, full of boxes, but the wall was real. Behind it, a safe that had a letter and a single flash drive inside. She picked up the drive and clicked it into her laptop, and what played out buckled her knees. It was footage of her, every week, at every party, and every moment she'd thought he wasn't watching. He actually was and watched her closely. He had records of her kindnesses, times she helped staff, donated quietly, comforted crying guests. He also recorded cruelty, moments she snapped at a maid or belittled someone on the phone. Every word, every choice. He'd been documenting her soul. The letter explained everything going on with Charles. The letter reads, "Emily, I knew why you came to me. I saw the hunger in your eyes when I met you, but I also saw something else. A woman who had been broken by the world, who believed money could heal the wound. So I had to give you a life of wealth, to see what you would do when nothing was out of reach. What you didn't know was that you were not being loved. You were being observed." Emily held her breath. At the bottom of the letter was a final line. "If you still want the real inheritance, then you'll have to go to the place where you first spilled the drink." She paused and stared at it for hours. She couldn't believe a thing yet. It's all moving too fast for her. The next morning, she returned to the fundraiser venue. The building was abandoned, but inside, In the corner where she once cried over a broken purse was a single briefcase, and inside that brief, a deed, an entire block of community housing, paid off in full under her name, and a check of $10 million, labeled, "Seed for whatever you believe in, if you've learned what wealth is." But that wasn't all. Tucked behind the check was another note that reads, "If you're reading this, then you passed the first test. Now, it's time to meet the others who are watching you." She turned around, towards the door, and there stood two people she'd never seen before wearing Huxley family ring. Emily never expected to find family at the door. Not after the funeral. Definitely not after the will. And obviously not after the letter that exposed everything. She thought she knew. But the moment those two strangers stepped forward, with the same crest Charles wore on his cufflinks, she realized something's cooking. The man she married hadn't just left her a fortune. He'd left her a legacy and a test that still wasn't over. The two strangers introduced themselves only as Julian and Celeste. They were distant relatives of Charles, not in the public eye, not listed in his will nor part of his corporate empire. They weren't surprised to see her. "We've been waiting," Julian said. "You weren't the only one he tested." Emily looked confused and defensive, but Celeste handed her a sealed envelope marked Emily Phase 2, and inside that envelope, a plane ticket, a burner phone, and one sentence handwritten in Charles's familiar style. "Wealth isn't what you take. It's what you risk for others." The next day, against her better judgment, Emily boarded a private jet to a destination she didn't recognize on the ticket, Pinebridge, a rural town, rusting factories, empty homes, a place where hope had moved out years ago. Celeste then explained, "Charles used to visit here when no one else cared. He quietly and anonymously built the clinics and shelters. He said real impact is done without applause." Emily hadn't known this version of him. All she knew was luxuries, diamonds, private chefs, and art auctions. This was different. She was taken to a small community center. Inside, dozens of people greeted her not as a trophy widow, but as a symbol. They'd seen her name on the housing deed. They thought she was part of it all. Julian handed her a file full of hundreds of projects, underfunded, nearly dead, and each connected to Charles in secret, and now all tied to her. "He left it all to you. But there's a catch," Julian said. "You don't get the second half of your inheritance unless you choose to stay, to run this, to build it from the ground up." Emily laughed bitterly and shook her head downwards. "So I don't get the money unless I play the saint?" Celeste looked her dead in the eye. "No, you don't get the truth unless you stop chasing the illusion." That night, Emily stayed back, and that turned into a week. She sat in classrooms. She served in the kitchen, listened to stories. She started hearing Charles and their words, and the way they talked about hope, pride, and quiet generosity. Then one morning, the burner phone rang. A scrambled voice said, "You've passed more than he ever expected. But there's still one person you haven't met. The one Charles built all of this for." They gave her an address. The address, an old cabin at the edge of town. She drove there alone. Met no one inside, just photos, newspaper clippings, and a child's drawing of Charles, holding a little girl's hand. Then Emily stepped closer and saw her own name on a birth certificate. Emily Huxley, born 27 years ago. Mother deceased. Father, Charles Whitman Huxley. Emily staggered back. She remembered now fragments, whispers of her mother crying behind closed doors. Letters she never understood. How a man would send money but never came around. She thought she was just a gold digger who got lucky. But she was never a stranger to Charles. She was his daughter, and everything he gave. All the test, the cold silence, wasn't punishment. It was protection. It was preparation for what's to come next. In the corner of the cabin, a small digital safe box blinked. Emily entered her birth date to open it. And right there, inside the small digital safe, one final envelope. She opened it. "I had to leave you once. But now, the world I built is yours to lead. Unless someone stops you first." This made her heart pump fast. She turned when she heard footsteps towards cabin. and a shadow stepped in. Then the cabin door creaked open. At that moment, Emily knew the test wasn't over, and the fortune Charles left her wasn't just money, but a threat, because now she wasn't just the widow of a billionaire. She was his daughter, and someone out there didn't want that truth getting out. With her heart pounding, she turned, backed away, clutching the final envelope. "Who are you?" she asked. He stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come here alone. My name is Edgar Voss, Charles's former attorney, someone who kept your father's secrets until now, but not the one who drafted the public will. There are men who would kill to keep what you just found a secret." "Why?" Emily asked. He sighed. "Because if the world finds out Charles Huxley had a biological heir, it doesn't just change the inheritance. It undoes everything." Emily sat down. The final letter from the safe trembled in her hand. She opened it. Inside, dozens of names, corporate executives, political figures, even Charles's former protege, now CEO of the Huxley Foundation. Next to each name, a coded ledger. Dates, payoffs, leverage. Charles hadn't just built a business empire. He had built a vault of secrets. And now, all of it was Emily's. Edgar handed her a burner phone. "This will ping. When it does, you run. Not to the police, and make sure you don't go to the press. You should go to one person only." "Who?" He hesitated. "The one your father never trusted, but the only one who can keep you alive." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Everything moved so fast for her. She thought about the mansion, the designer shoes, the fake friends who thought she'd struck gold. Then, just before dawn, the phone pinged. A single text. "They know. Get out. Now." She fled Pine Bridge in a borrowed truck, took back roads, switched some cards, and just after sunset, she arrived at a crumbling stone estate outside Charleston. It was overgrown, abandoned, but inside one light was on. She entered. A man late 40s, graying at the temples, sharp-eyed, was waiting. "You're Emily." Then he introduced himself. "I'm Logan Maris. I used to be your father's biggest enemy and his only equal." Logan revealed what no one else had. "I'll tell you something for free." He paused. Charles hadn't stumbled into wealth. He'd built it from nothing, just like Logan. But where Logan chose raw capitalism, Charles built leverage. He created charities to infiltrate networks, investments that exposed corruption, even marriages that weren't what they seemed. He never trusted anyone, Emily. Not even me. But he trusted you enough to test you. While talking, Logan opened a black notebook he picked up from inside the drawer labeled Contingency X. "If you're holding this, you're the last move on the board." The notebook contained plans of how to dismantle Charles's entire empire, piece by piece. "Why?" Emily asked. "Because Charles feared what would happen if the wrong people took control. They are circling now." Corporate board members had already filed for legal control of his foundation, and Emily's identity as his daughter? Still unproven, unless she acted fast. She returned to the mansion under the cover of the night, in Charles's private study. Sealed for weeks, she used the key left in the attic to unlock what needed and found. A lockbox labeled Emily Day 1. It contained her DNA test, her baby photos, letters from her mother never seen before, and a document signed in Charles's hand signature. "She is my blood, my legacy, my reckoning." The next day, Emily walked into the Huxley boardroom. They were waiting, smiling like sharks. "We're so sorry for your loss," one executive said, "but the foundation must be handled by professionals." Emily said nothing. She laid the notebook on the table. "You come for this, and the next 72 hours will be a scandal you'll never recover from." Then she handed over the DNA proof. "But if you back off, I'll preserve the empire, on my terms, and every one of your secrets stays buried." They went pale, angry and defeated. No one spoke. She walked out with her head held high. Outside, Julian and Celeste were waiting. Julian asked, "So what now?" Emily smiling. "Now, I stop being a player in someone else's test and start becoming the architect of my own." Sometimes, The greatest wealth isn't what you inherit. It's what you learn to protect. This is Tracelight Stories. Do well to support the channel by smashing the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.